Hey human, thanks so much for tuning in to the Be You Get Paid podcast. I'm your host, Amy Taylor, and I have one goal by being in your ears: to explore conversations about the stuff we did not learn in school. You know, stuff that would have actually helped a lot more of us thrive rather than just survive as grown-ups in an often challenging and ever-changing world. As the title might suggest, this includes anything involved with knowing ourselves, understanding money, and generally how we can all be happier humans. With that in mind, wherever you're listening, you'll find links to some of the best resources I've personally found to help with all of those things. Sometimes I'll talk about these in a bit more detail, but for now, let's get into what I hope is some helpful chat. I think I have the technology functioning. You're in for a treat if you're watching this or listening to this on YouTube, I tell ya. Hi fam. Anyone listening that's not my mum? So this is me getting into action, recording my first podcast. I did just have a go before and realised that I kept touching my desk and my microphone and camera was shaking and tapping things. So I'm hoping this will be my one take wonder at the second attempt. Hi, welcome to the Be You Get Paid podcast. I might have already said that because I've recorded myself an introduction that I was going to stick in as a template. This is me just kicking myself up the bum to get started because I've been procrastinating like a pro over getting this launched. I've already recorded a couple of interviews, but I really wanted to record an introduction to say hi and to wrap my head around how the hell I upload podcasts and do all that stuff. So I'm taking a bit of my own advice that I frequently give other people, which is to kick them up the bum and say, just get on with it. So I'm just getting on with it. That was a very long-winded way of making excuses and disclaimers for anything that might go wrong in this first attempt. So hi, Amy Taylor here. If you don't know who I am, the intention of this episode is purely to say hi, welcome you to the podcast, let you know a bit about me and my intentions for being here and doing this. Do I give you my whole life history? I tend to waffle and ramble and go on tangents and talk a lot. But that's kind of why I'm doing a podcast rather than anything else. I do have some notes here because I started thinking I'll just make myself some bullet points, just a few succinct bullet points. I can't do it. I ended up with writer's blob, which someone, I can't remember who it was, told me is the opposite of writer's block. I definitely didn't have writer's block today. So I've now got endless paragraphs on my notes app on my laptop, so I'm just going to try and ignore that because it'll just get lost and it won't be natural. But yeah, thought I'd give you a bit of an introduction to me. I did actually get writer's blob the other day on my website that I threw together. So if you really want to see the long extended version of my life and all details before I started doing what I'm doing now, go ahead. But yeah, this is me. I'm Amy Taylor. I'm here on the Gold Coast in Australia. Well, technically not. I'm a bit further south than that. But as you can probably tell by my accent, I'm originally a Brit. And so I'm a millennial. I'm a millennial. I'm a few months post 40th birthday. And that's relevant because a lot of the stuff I'm going to be talking about, I think, is particularly relevant to my age group. Those of us having a midlife crisis and just throwing it all up in the air and going, what are we going to do next? I think there's a lot of us in that category, even though millennials are technically, at this point in time in 2023, I think around 27 to 42. So I'm just in the upper echelons of being a millennial. I'm gripping onto that because I refuse to say I'm a Gen X. But Be You Get Paid. Why make a podcast or why record a podcast called Be You Get Paid? Well, essentially, and I'll back up the truck in a minute to tell you how I got here, but essentially I came to the realization about 3 or 4 years ago, before the world fell apart and went down many other tangents that I'll get onto shortly. I came up with this notion of just be you, get paid. If we had learned nothing else at school except subject matter and topics and homework, I guess, assignments on all the things related to just being ourselves, and then a few things related to money, how it works, entrepreneurship maybe, how to be self-sufficient, I think a lot more of us would be okay. Whereas we find ourselves in this world where, and I saw this a lot through my online journey up to this point, which I'll go back to in a minute and fill you in if you don't know who I am or what I do. there's just a lot of people that seem to be struggling right now. And obviously the last 2 or 3 years has exacerbated that for a lot of people. But I particularly notice it in my peer group and age group that a lot of us have just kind of defaulted onto a path, or a career perhaps. And then because of the rising cost of living and that kind of thing, people just end up trapped. And my journey of the last 9 years, when I decided to go online and start a business online, and I've been earning a living online ever since for the last 9 years in various forms, which again, I'll back up the truck in a minute and give you a bit of my history. I feel like if we had more of these skills around just understanding who we are and understanding how money works and in the wider world, but also, you know, ways that we can monetize our gifts and talents and what we're good at, I just see a world of a lot more happy people. And I think if there's more happy humans around on planet Earth, the world would just be a better place. So that's what I'm here for. And back in 2020, I was at a point in my journey online. I say journey a lot, I've noticed. Sorry, it's a bit cringe. But yeah, let me go all the way back. So up to the point of deciding to start an online business or earn a living online, which was primarily driven from a desire to travel and work from anywhere. It wasn't so much about making lots and lots of money. That would be nice too. And I've done okay for sure. It was more about just wanting to travel, because at that time in my life, I was coming up to my 30th birthday. I was working on cruise ships. So that was my life hack to travel and get paid at the same time, was to work in unconventional jobs whilst I was traveling. And then if I ran out of money, just come back home and back to London at the time and work for a while until I had enough money to go off on some other adventure. And I had a good time. In my 20s and 30s, I think like a lot of people were spent doing a lot of that. And then I kind of got to the point where I was like, I still want to be able to travel, and I still would love to be able to work from anywhere so that my travel isn't hindered by time or budget. But I also kind of want to be a grown up and have a bit of a base and just live where I want to live, when I want to live there. But I'm happy to work, but I just want to be able to do it from anywhere. So online was the answer for me. It was a very obvious answer for me at the time. And this was back in 2013. And I guess I've taken it for granted that that's just what everybody does. So when the pandemic hit around 2020, I was quite shocked at how hard it was for so many people to adjust to working online. Obviously, everyone's situation was subjective and different. And there's a lot of other things there's pros and cons to everything. There was a lot of downside to being stuck in your house, which I think we all learned a lot from. And I would have thought we'd all learned a lot from that all playing out the way it did. The biggest thing for me was watching how polarized the world became and how everyone seems to feel they need to pick a side with things. And I'm digressing, but I was in a situation at the time where my business online had kind of morphed from I was doing a bit of affiliate marketing to start with. That got me out of my corporate job back in 2015. And my sort of skills and passions, I guess, had morphed along the way to a point where I was doing coaching and consulting for small business owners and other solopreneurs online in 2020. And I just found myself doing a lot of calls with very, very, I don't want to say depressed, some were depressed, but obviously people who were struggling because businesses were closed and the world was just in chaos. And it as a coach at the time, or as a consultant and mentor at the time for these people, I just was emotionally drained. So I decided to just switch off and just stop working, essentially. I also had my mum come over from the UK for what was a 6-week holiday, and she ended up getting stuck for nearly 3 years, and she now lives here. So that worked out for me quite well, in the sense that a lot of people were stuck apart from their family and parents. I was stuck with mine in a 2-bedroom apartment, which definitely had its challenges. But that was another reason it made it difficult to focus. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to surrender. This is my situation. I'm going to switch off. I'm going to stop working for a while. And I just had a really good look at myself, at the world. And obviously everyone had a lot of questions. And up to that point, the biggest challenges I'd noticed people having when they were trying to start businesses or run businesses, and they came to me for advice on marketing and how do I show up and be me, and that was always the biggest challenge a lot of people had, was I don't know what I have to offer, or I don't know what my message is to the world. I don't know who I am. I just need to make money and I want to make it online. And then the flip side of that was having people who nailed making money, but it didn't fulfill them. So then they were faced with the who am I? So I came up with this kind of you get paid is just focus on those two things. And they're two very big things regardless. But that's why I've kind of come up with this brand, and what does it mean, and what does freedom and happiness mean for lots of different people, because that's kind of, I've seen so many different versions of it along the way in my, I don't keep saying journey, but my time online, and my own sort of challenges that I've had to overcome with having a business online, and, you know, making that leap from being an employee into being self-sufficient. It's not easy. It is simple. It's not easy. You'll hear me say that a lot. And I've heard a lot of my mentors say that. So that's kind of what led me to this point. And from 2020 onwards, I was like, I just need to go deep on who I am if I'm going to start helping people with that. I looked into different coaching modalities that I could look at to add to my toolkit, I guess, as a coach. And the one that I settled on, that I had done myself, and what I decided to get certified in as a coach, was the Clifton Strengths modality, which is, I don't know if Clifton Strengths own Gallup, or if Gallup own Clifton Strengths, but you may have heard of Gallup. They're the data and analytics company that run lots of polls around the world, the Gallup polls. They're a US-based company, but you've probably heard of them. And they are the ones that put out the workplace culture reports. And I'm just going to read you an excerpt quickly from last year's. This is the 2022 State of the Workplace, Global State of the Workplace report. And you may have heard this stat before, but it's an up-to-date one for 2022. So the first finding was before the pandemic, engagement and well-being were rising globally for nearly a decade, but now they're stagnant. I should start this again. So this is the global engagement and well-being metrics, I guess, from the polls that Gallup run around the world with thousands and thousands and thousands of employees in lots of different companies. I keep shaking my desk. Sorry if you're watching. Camera's going a bit wonky. But basically, we're up to 79%. It used to be higher, but now it's sort of sitting around this 80% of people that are not engaged at work, or actively disengaged, looking for something else. And the most commonly occurring comments in these polls are living for the weekend, watching the clock tick, work is just a paycheck. These are the mantras of most global workers. With only 21% of employees engaged at work and 33% of employees thriving in their overall well-being, most would say they don't find their work meaningful, they don't think their lives are going well, and they don't feel hopeful about their future. Now, sorry to be a rain on your parade, or, you know, be a doomsdayer. I'm here to be the opposite, because I know from personal experience that there's actually never been a better time to be sort of first figuring out who you are and what you enjoy and what you're good at, and giving yourself the grace to go, I have value to offer. Human beings are amazing. I fundamentally believe human beings are good. I fundamentally believe that humans are fundamentally creative, and we all have natural gifts and talents. And that was a big part of my certification in looking at strengths. And the strengths assessment, if you've not heard of it, it's called Clifton Strengths. Go and look it up. There'll be links in my socials to it. It's $20. I think it might have gone up to $25 recently. And you get some amazing reports. It's so much deeper and more substantial than a lot of these assessments that you'll see out there. And it's a great icebreaker into understanding where you're at right now and why you're doing things the way you do. And it shouldn't be used as a recruitment tool. I've seen a lot of videos out there where people are saying it's a recruitment tool. It's not. There are other tools for recruitment, but this is not one of them. This is to assess your natural ways of being and behaviours. Because if you are aware of what your natural talents and behaviours and ways of being are, you can double down on them to approach everything you do, rather than work on your weaknesses, which is really hard work. So that's a bit about the coaching that I do. But it's relevant to Gallup, because Gallup are the company that do a lot of this research, that we then use these assessments to try and improve workplace culture so that people are actually doing things they're good at, and hopefully therefore feel more engaged at work or in their lives, if they work for themselves, perhaps. But after 2020, and I did my certification, I did a lot of study. So this is 3 years ago now. Gallup also released this book. I'm holding it up for those of you listening. It's called Blind Spot, The Global Rise of Unhappiness and How Leaders Missed It. So it's a book by the CEO, John Clifton, of Gallup. And the chart that stood out for me as I started reading this book was this one. Now, if you're listening and not watching, that chart there is basically, if you imagine a graph going from the bottom left corner to the top right corner, upwards, basically, an upwards trend of unhappiness. Again, more doom and gloom, but there's a reason. So that was collecting data from the surveys and the polls on a negative experience index, which is a composite measure of the 5 negative experiences: anger, stress, sadness, physical pain, and worry. Now, obviously, since the pandemic, those have exacerbated for a lot of people. And so I was just observing all of this, and I was down my little rabbit hole of being a bit of a hermit for now nearly 3 years, whilst doing bits and pieces of other work. But I just became a bit obsessed with this happiness thing. Like, what does it mean? It's so subjective, in the same way that freedom was so subjective for me when I decided to start working online. I just wanted to travel and have time freedom. Money helps with everything, there's no question. Some people are really driven by money and a lifestyle that they may want, and there's still plenty of reasons to work remotely and be flexible and mobile. I don't think anyone can't benefit from that. So for me, it was freedom meant work anywhere, on my own terms, on my own hours. Now I'm kind of more about, I still want geographic freedom. I love where I live, and having that geographic freedom enabled me to move to the Gold Coast. And, you know, I've always wanted to live near the ocean and near the beach. And once I came to visit this place, I've got beachy hair today, actually. I didn't go and do it as neatly as I would like to have done, but never mind. I always wanted to live near the ocean. And so now I'm more about, I still want my time freedom, but you never know what life might throw at you, where moving to a new place is going to be necessary. And I've never been someone to subscribe to this idea that, oh, I'd love to live there, but what would I do for work? It's like, well, let's flip that over. So that's what I stand for, and that's what I believe everyone can benefit from by at least having one income stream online. But more importantly now, having spent time really sort of brewing these thoughts, is creativity. I think so many of us just don't think we're creative, but creativity can mean so many things, and it's just having an outlet for what you're good at, what you're best at, whether it doesn't have to be something artistic. I actually love writing, and I'm trying to do a lot more writing, and then actually intentionally learn how to write now. I don't love doing videos, but I'm a talker, so a podcast made sense. So this is very much a creative outlet for me, and an excuse to have great chats with some great people that I've been fortunate enough to meet along the way. But I think so many more people would be happy if they just gave themselves the time, even if it's an hour a week, to do something that they love doing. And then if that ignites a fire to then want to start a business or create a new income stream that's flexible, that means they can do more of that, fantastic. But it's this freedom and happiness. I don't think enough people are feeling free and happy. And there's just so many people on autopilot. And I don't think it ends well. I don't think it's good for society to have so many people feeling this way and, purposeless. I think having some sort of purpose in your life is very, very important. So that's a big, long ramble and rant about how I got here. And now I'm just really on a mission to keep reminding people of this. If all you had to focus on was being you and understanding money and getting paid and understanding that you have value to offer, figure out what that is. That is a long journey. It's a lifetime's work for some people. But holding ourselves back, and we're all guilty of it. It's a lifetime's work. I don't think you ever stop having human thoughts of self-doubt and lacking confidence or thinking we lack creativity, but just actually giving yourself the headspace to go, well, hang on a minute. Some of this is resonating, and there'll be links all over my social media for ways to get started or recommended resources from me. And I still coach on this stuff, with digital marketing and particularly affiliate marketing. I think it's a great place to start. But the big thing is happiness. I just want to see more people happy. I think the world is changing so quickly. There's so much opportunity, but people are stuck in this trap of, but my life's getting more expensive, so I can't afford to give this job up because I'm stuck in a paycheck. But 1 year of focused effort can be life-changing. I've seen it for many people. It took me longer than that. I actually worked in my job with my business starting off as a evenings and weekends thing for 18 months before I quit my job, but I've seen people do it a lot quicker. What that is for you, I don't know, but we live in this online world and it is changing so fast. You've probably seen and heard about ChatGPT and AI, and it can be incredibly overwhelming. But the point is, for every doomsday you hear and for every piece of mainstream media news that you might pay attention to, just trust that there is an opposite and there is as much hope as there is despair out there. It's just what you choose to focus on. And the first thing and only thing I would give as advice, unsolicited, would be please turn off the news. And if people haven't learnt that from the pandemic, I don't know what they have, because the biggest thing for me is this polarity concept. I was a noisemaker in my business before. I was making videos and tying in stories to why you should start a business online, because this in the news and this in the world, and I was just getting noisy on every bandwagon, and I had to change my mind on a lot of things. And I'm not afraid to change my perspective. And I think that's been part of my own development by being down a rabbit hole, one of them being this thing here, this orange cushion, Bitcoin, which I'll get onto in a minute. I just learned a lot about myself by just taking that time out and reflecting and sort of observing what was going on in the world and questioning it. And I've always been a why person. I was one of those kids who said why to everything. But I think so many more of us than are willing to admit are actually having those thoughts of, well, this doesn't seem to make sense. And particularly my age group, the millennials out there who, we're old enough to have learnt a few things, but we're young enough to have plenty of life left in us. This is the age where the midlife crisis happens. But I think a pandemic, or what played out, has really made people reassess what's important. At least I hope it has. And I'm here to kind of just dive into that and go, you have options. So those of us who have reached this midlife crisis stage, my partner and I even have a boat that we've called MLC for that reason. Hilarious. Learning to sail. There you go. Perfect example of what you do when you're in your 40s and having a midlife crisis. So that's hopefully given you a bit of a flavour of what I'm here to discuss and get lots of perspectives on from my various guests. If you want to see any more about me and my journey before, to see if I'm legit and who am I to talk about this stuff, trust me, I've asked that many times before recording this. Feel free to go stalk me on social media, Amy Taylor Says, on Instagram, Twitter. I'll chuck links in wherever I put links when I upload a podcast. No idea yet. But feel free to get in touch. What else can I tell you? I feel like I'm introducing myself at an AA meeting. Probably shouldn't say that, really. Bit inappropriate. But the crux of it is this. Let me come back to it. I haven't got my glasses on and I'm trying to read my own notes. If I'm squinting on video, if you're watching, like I said, you're in for a treat. I do that a lot. Oh, Bitcoin. Got to tell you about Bitcoin. So my Bitcoin journey. So having gone down all these rabbit holes and watched the world play out the way it did, how could I forget Bitcoin? My God, I've got the cushion there and everything in the background to remind me. All these rabbit holes of why are people unhappy? And then obviously looking at this chart of unhappiness rising with Gallup. I had heard about Bitcoin in 2017. Got in, lost money, got out, forgot about it. But had lots of smart people in my peer group, online and offline, who were talking about it. And so I started swatting up on it again once I was in this kind of hermit state through the pandemic. And I got hooked because a lot of things started to make a lot of sense to me. You won't ever understand Bitcoin if you don't put the hours into just understanding the very boring, dry material that explains the current financial system. Read the Bitcoin Standard. It is dry and boring in parts, I'm not going to lie. but it will be the best education you can give yourself to start having a think about, well, if I'm going to reset my life, I need to reset my life because the world is not in a good place. And unfortunately, you can look at most issues that you might think are not great in the world, and when you peel enough layers back, it all comes down to money and a very, very broken system. And I believe, linking it back to what I was talking about before, that is why so many people are struggling at work and unhappy, because no matter what they do, no matter what they've done, especially to this point, they just somehow aren't getting ahead, or they aren't, for whatever reason, fulfilled. And I think if you're in your 30s and 40s, that's a serious question, because you have got plenty of life left, but you don't want to spend another 30 or 40 years like this. And particularly people in this age group, ask your parents where they're at, because that was a big wake-up call for me. You know, this system has been the same for so many decades and generations, and nothing seems to be improving. You know, the cost of living just does not stop going up. Why? Why is that? And when you really go down that rabbit hole, this big bright orange cushion, or what we like in the Bitcoin space like to call a big bright orange future, is the solution as far as I'm concerned. So I'm pretty hardcore on this stuff now. And it really is the missing piece for me, sort of for someone who's going to obsess over what does freedom and happiness mean for lots of different people. Money is a fundamental part of our existence as humans. It's not something that animals use. It's what separates us from the rest of nature. And it's very, very broken. And when you do this work and read the content that might feel a bit dull and dry and boring, all the light bulbs just start to go off. And I've been reading various books over here on economics and how they work, how humans react to certain conditions. You know, not everyone's going to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone's going to be in the top percentage of wealth. But I think it should be okay to do a job you love, or to do work you love, and not necessarily be in the top bracket of earners, but you should be able to do that for your life and be okay financially. And with the way things are going, and when you understand this stuff, it's not happening. We're falling into a society of people that are just being held down by a system of broken money that means you're essentially having your labor stolen from you. Because if the money you're putting aside, whether that be into, you know, any derivative of dollars or whatever your currency is, but yet a government can turn around and just print more of it, which devalues the money, and therefore the dollars or pounds or euros or whatever it is you're putting away now aren't going to be enough later, that's not okay. And the only reason that happens is because money is controlled centrally by entities that we have no say in. And that's as simple as I can put it, because it's not a quick conversation. It's hours and hours and hours of work and reading. I'm going to be doing my best through this podcast, talking to different people about the issues it impacts and how money impacts our happiness, and how, you know, even if you're doing extremely well for yourself, we're all disadvantaged by the current system being centrally controlled, and something that just devalues the work you do, which is why I believe so many people end up in jobs and careers for a paycheck that they don't necessarily feel passionate about or called to. And then that is a slippery slope to happiness falling. So that's where it all kind of, I hope I've done a good enough job of tying all this together, and why I'm interested in Bitcoin and why it's such a thing that I get very passionate about when it comes to freedom and happiness. And I'll be doing my best to get guests on who may or may not be interested in Bitcoin, but guests who have an expertise in things that impact our happiness. For example, one of the early episodes is going to be with a friend of mine called Vicky. She is a womb healing expert, so she has a lot to say about mainstream approaches to fertility, especially someone my age, and you might be thinking about it, again, millennials, that age group. If you're in the lower ends of the millennial age bracket, you may have already had children, you may be putting it off. And Vicky had a lot of really good insight into that subject, which, you know, having babies is something that humans do, and it brings people a lot of happiness and joy. And So topics like that, I'm aiming to get guests on who are experts in areas that make us happy, and how money and finances and career is impacting that. So it's a broad topic, freedom and happiness, very, very broad. But I like to keep things broad, so I've got lots of options of things to talk about. But I will be kicking things off in episode 1 with the lovely Natalie Brunel, who absolutely is a Bitcoiner. And she's the perfect conversation to kick this podcast off, because she has walked away from her career and made a big shift as a millennial into something else. She is a Bitcoiner. She's great. I've met her a couple of times now, and she's a huge voice in the Bitcoin space. So I'm extremely honored to have interviewed her, and that will be coming up on episode 1. But what this all comes down to is what I firmly believe, which is, if I'm not here to plug my coaching at all, this is a creative outlet for me, this podcast. But what I firmly believe and what I aim to help people with in my work now is, the quality of our life comes down to the quality of our relationships. And that starts with the relationship we have with ourselves. And that is something I've spent at least 10 years working on intentionally, and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on. I worked it out the other day. I'm probably close to $250,000 US on my professional and personal development, coaching, therapy, all the things. So it's something I take very seriously. And the quality of our relationships comes down to the quality of our conversations and our communication, and our transformation. So that's what I'm here for. All about the freedom, all about happiness, and all things that affect it. So it should be an open, generic topic to have lots of interesting chat. I hope you'll join me for the journey. There it is again, that word. Feel free to connect on social media, Amy Taylor Says, or drop me an email at amy@beyougetpaid.com. I think that's a fairly comprehensive introduction. 31 minutes is probably not even going to save on my laptop, and I'll be back to having tech issues. Wonderful. I will see you and get back in your ears, hopefully very soon. Take care.